Welcome to the Tech Ed Podcast, where we visit with leaders who are shaping, innovating, and disrupting technical education. People who are not afraid to think differently, not afraid to try something new, all with the goal of securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. Technical education hears much about Industry 4.0, about how technologies like cyber-physical systems, smart sensors, smart devices, artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital twins, and automated guided vehicles are totally changing the way products are manufactured, creating a new industrial revolution where humans interact with industrial machines and equipment in ways that could have sounded like tales of science fiction just a decade or so ago. Along with this new revolution in industrial technology comes a revolution in how we prepare our present and future workforce. Middle school and high school students today learning about the Industry 4.0 technology they will use in the future. Community and technical colleges preparing cutting-edge technicians, universities teaching tomorrow's engineers in entirely new ways and about entirely new learning outcomes, and industrial employers upskilling their current workforces for the future of work. We hear of this in industry, we see it in manufacturing, but are Industry 4.0 and like technologies revolutionizing other sectors of our economy? Will the Industry 4.0 knowledge gained by our tech ed, engineering, and IT students lend itself to success in fields outside industry? Will the technicians and engineers of the future take their knowledge of smart technology, devices, and data science and port it from market sector to market sector? Rick Anderson has been instrumental in leading some of the more recognizable organizations in the world of healthcare. He was on the ground floor at WebMD, working closely with founder and entrepreneurial icon Jeff Arnold. When I first met Rick, he was serving as Senior Vice President of the health and wellness engagement platform giant Sharecare. And in the last several years, he has revolutionized the MRI market as Chairman and CEO of Smart Choice and is advancing treatment for those suffering from carpal tunnel pain with his startup, the Ovation Hand Institute. He is a visionary, a true market disruptor, and the perfect expert to share with us how Industry 4.0-like evolution is taking place in markets outside of industry, and what that means for technical education students and learners. So Rick, you were on the ground floor at WebMD. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Happy to. I think back to 1994 when I was actually working in Chicago in a family business, and of all things construction. Grew up in the family, was very much planned to be the person that took the business over, and was kind of all set. And my wife, and one of the key lessons here, by the way, is find a great teammate. And my wife, Dana, said to me one day, I think maybe you could do things maybe better or bigger than what you're doing. And of course, I disagreed immediately and thought, well, I've got my plan. I'm set. And she encouraged me to think about healthcare as something that was not only recession-proof, but exciting and dynamic, and you could kind of just about go anywhere. And so we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and where we knew nobody. And I took a job in medical sales. And about the first week in, I met a guy named Jeff Arnold. And Jeff actually called me. And so he said, I want to be the leader in cardiac telemedicine, specifically around arrhythmia monitoring and pacemaker follow-up and management, which is mission critical for people that suffer from heart disease, especially arrhythmias and in need of pacing devices. With the first meeting, I was just like, this gentleman, young man, as I was too, is going to be an amazing success. And so I sold him the hardware and software he needed to start that business, or really he had started it already, but took it to the next level. Well, it's a long story, so I'll be brief, but in 18 months, we took that little business because I promptly quit my first job, went to join Jeff as his director of sales and marketing. And in 18 months, we sold that company to an entity called Matria Healthcare for $25 million in cash. And under Jeff's leadership, we just saw that anything was possible. We said we were going to be the number one in the country. There were 54 little mom and pops that did that same sort of, it was almost like the physician answering service back in the days. Very, very rudimentary, but the technology was great. As we were getting ready to sell it, one of the frustrations we had was this was during the advent or creation of the internet. And so there were no PCs in doctors' offices other than maybe the physician had a PC in his or her office that was locked up. Everything was done by thermal paper fax machines. And if you think about reading an EKG over a fax, it's just not really good. So Jeff said, somehow we've got to find a way to harness this thing, the World Wide Web, to get these reports to the doctors. And we started it, but by the time we kind of got to that point where we were getting good at it, we sold the company. And with that, there were about 155 employees, but Jeff kept 5 of us and said, you're coming with me to the next thing. And I was fortunate to be in one of those, as we kind of called ourselves the original five. We sat in a room and Jeff said, we're going to find a way to harness the internet to communicate between doctors and patients. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but I already have the name figured out, and we're going to call it WebMD. And I'll never forget to this day him writing that on the whiteboard. And we all just we sat in amazement and thought, I don't know what this is, but this is going to be cool. We spent, I think, $4,000 getting the name, and now that name is priceless. And then WebMD was a very similar story. It was about the fact that we could really do anything. There was nothing stopping us. We raised a tremendous amount of capital. We had investment partners, strategic partners, like Microsoft, that wanted to be on board. And then 18 months later, we took it public, and it was a life-changing event. Something I'll never forget, the fastest, wildest ride in my career. And something that I think, if I could put a kind of fine point on it, if you think about the legacy internet names from the .com era, you've got eBay, you've got Amazon, you've got WebMD. There's not many, and so to be part of that was just phenomenal. And the last thing I'll say about it is it taught me that anything is possible. And I've always been a pretty confident person, but Jeff showed me that when you set your mind to something and you want to do it, you can get it done.
So I think the idea of finding a great teammate, and as you know, I know your wife Dana, and there's no question that you succeeded wildly in that, even more so than you succeeded at WebMD. But having the right teammate is so important, and it's clear that this whole idea of anything being possible is a key thing that you learned working with that WebMD founder Jeff Arnold. Are there some other things you can point to, Rick, that you learned working with such a famous and well-known entrepreneur?
I think the thing that I learned with Jeff beyond, that anything is possible is that I can't remember who said it, but the old adage that speed is God and time is the devil. We just didn't sit still. If we said we were going to go do something, we did it. I mean, we were young and we were aggressive, and, we hadn't fallen into that trap of, well, we'll just kind of come to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So work ethic, something that Jeff really led by example, hardest working person I know to this day. And I think the other thing that Jeff would do that was really kind of inspirational more than anything else is just when we thought we were static and set with what our product offering was going to be, he would never stop tinkering. He'd have a new thing that he wanted to sort of look into. And I'll give you an example, and I'm sure we'll talk about Sharecare in a minute. But Jeff had this idea that with Sharecare, your phone is basically everything. Everything can be measured, monitored, and handled when it comes to your health and mental and physical wellness on the phone. So we started looking at a technology called fractal voice response, which allowed for you to be on a phone call like today with you guys. And when I'm done, I can hang up and it would analyze my voice pattern and tell me if I have a higher level of stress when I talk to Matt or a lower level of stress. And so per phone call, I can see who are the people in my life that really kind of maybe agitate me, or I'm nervous around, or I'm comfortable with, and it'll help you improve sort of your own mental health and wellness. That kind of technology, very few people think that way. And so I think with Jeff, what was really special was to watch someone always pushing the boundaries of anything is possible.
So does being on this call with us today, is that agitating or comforting? You have to answer that question for us.
You know what? To be candid, someone like you, one of my best friends, a great mentor and teammate, someone I have lunch with and share all my war stories. It's very relaxing.
Awesome. I feel the same way. And we've shared a lot of interesting stories over the years, Rick. You once told me about how you felt the day that WebMD went public. Obviously, wildly successful, set up your career in so many ways. Share that story with our audience, if you would.
Yeah, happy to. Imagine being, in your early 30s. I think I was 30. I was a faithful lieutenant of Jeff's and was thrilled to be there. What happened was, we're running this company. It's growing super fast. Every single day there's new capital coming in. And we decide to go public. So we file our S1, and we're very quiet about it, of course. And Microsoft looked at the internet and healthcare and said, you know what, this is something we want to own. And prior to that, Jim Clark, founder of Silicon Graphics and co-founder of Netscape, had taken a company called Healthion public. And Bill Gates, now I never talked to Bill Gates, I've never met Bill Gates, but the thesis was if Clark and Netscape were going to have Healthion, we're going to back WebMD. And that was right during the middle of the Internet Explorer Netscape wars. And I think Gates and the Microsoft team said, we just don't want to lose this one like we were losing at Netscape. And so on the eve of our IPO, he cut the most brilliant deal of all times. And that was just before we went public. Halcyon agreed to acquire us. And we all thought we were going to make a certain amount of money. We were kind of guessing and playing those silly games you do when you are playing with fake money. But he cut a deal where we got a 3-for-1 reverse stock split. So every share of WebMD now got 3 shares of publicly traded Halcyon. Still one of the best deals I've witnessed being cut in history. And so all of a sudden, it gets announced, and then every one of us that is a shareholder is watching CNBC all day instead of going to work, because we're realizing that what we thought was going to be $1 is now $3. And the stock the day before the announcement was at, I think, $19. So I'm doing $19 times my shares. And I'm thinking about the fact that I can pay off my car loan, and I can put the kitchen addition on our house I want to put on. And all of a sudden, a few days later, the stock's literally leading CNBC Squawk Box, and it's at 128 a share. So at 27 or 30, I can't remember how old I was then, but you can't comprehend that. And then you think about the people that had, significantly more than me, like Jeff, and you think, my goodness, this is not just life-changing, this is legacy creating. And, with the dot-com bust that happened shortly thereafter, this was right before the March crash, I was very fortunate. This goes back to my wife again, who said, you know what, the stock is at, I think it was at $54 a share. Let's just, let's sell it all and just count our blessings and say, you know what a great gift. And so we did. And a few weeks later, the stock went to 2. The market crashed, and a few of my friends, one of whom, Jeff Chester, who sits on my board at Smart Choice MRI, stayed with it and wrote it down to 2. And all he said was, man, I can't believe you thought of that. I can't believe you thought of that. I said, well, ask Dana, because she did it. And I would have stayed. I would have kept on going. I would have thought this. And even Jeff's brother, Scott Arnold, who's one of my best friends to this day, was like, you're a fool. This thing's going to go to 300. And, he was right. That was what it should have done. And, the good news is for everybody, the stock did recover. It's multi-billion-dollar success today. It took a few years, like a lot of the dot-coms did, but I left at the right time and was grateful to be able to have my wife, help me with the timing. To have a little bit of measured response was life-changing for us.
Well, I'll have to ask our Tech Ed podcast producer, Melissa Martin, to tee up Dana Anderson's stock tips as a future episode here on the Tech Ed podcast. We're with Rick Anderson, talking all about how the world that many of us are so accustomed to, Industry 4.0, is revolutionizing other markets. And we're going to get to that topic in just a moment. But before we do that, Rick, having set the table here with your success and your experience at WebMD, talk a little bit about how that affected your career and where your career led you following your experience there. After
WebMD, it's 2000. And I left WebMD and I went to go work for a startup called Xcara, which was out of Boston. And, it had everything you'd want. And this thing was going to be the end-all be-all solution for the MRO space, maintenance, repair, and operation, where people on the floor of a factory, instead of going to the big Granger book, and thumbing through for a washer or a pump or a part, could go to the internet and find the part, have it shipped, get it there the next day. That's something today we think of, well, of course you do that, right? Well, we couldn't get companies to adopt it. I was even on the ground in Connecticut at Amphenol Corporation, electronic parts manufacturer, on the factory floor, trying to teach these folks how to use this PC in their workshop. And it was a terrible failure. The company failed, went out of business, never went anywhere. And a good example of being somewhere too early. So after that, did a couple other things in healthcare and out of healthcare. And then Jeff and I were in Chicago in 2008. And he said to me, do you ever feel like we didn't finish things at WebMD? And I said, well, I thought it was a pretty big success. He said, no, if you think about it, we were a voice of one to many. So if you went to WebMD, just like you go today, and you type in what is an arrhythmia or what is heart disease, you get an answer and, well, good luck. And he's formulating this idea around building a company to pick up where WebMD left off. He said, we're going to start this company, and I think we're going to call it Sharecare. The founding group was, Hearst Corporation, Discovery Communications, Harpo Productions, Dr. Mehmet Oz, and Jeff Arnold. That was your founding 5 members. Sharecare today has raised probably $300-400 million in capital, is the leader in really helping people to understand that, no matter where you're at in your health journey, you can have all your health in one place. And so they sell a technology solution, app and really mobile based, that allows people to do everything from tracking their health journey to their mental and physical wellness to prescriptions to managing their health insurance plans. So they sell a lot into the payers, the employers, big companies like State Farm or Delta Airlines or Blue Cross of Hawaii. Other like those companies use Sharecare to help manage their employee population. And what I did for Sharecare for 5 years is I ran our hospital partners channel. And so if you remember what I said earlier about WebMD being a place where you could just go read about what's an arrhythmia, what we set out to do and were successful at doing was answering all of the questions of health, but not just answering them from a content creation standpoint, but to get the experts to create the content. So if you go to Sharecare today and you were to type in what is an arrhythmia, you'd get an answer from Johns Hopkins, from New York Presbyterian, from Brigham and Women's, from Aurora Healthcare, from UCLA. You'd get electrophysiologists, experts in their field, answering your questions about what is an arrhythmia. And then this was the key thing that made Sharecare successful, was instead of just reading about an arrhythmia, you can take action. You can book an appointment with that doctor. You can engage with people to actually get the healthcare as opposed to reading about the healthcare.
Absolutely fascinating evolution in terms of where WebMD led to what you did at Sharecare and the interactivity and also the continuing success of that business, which is due, I'm sure, in no part to your leadership and participation on that leadership team. And so following Sharecare, now you took a little bit more entrepreneurial approach and did some things on your own. Am I right about that?
Correct. I was happy working as senior vice president of our hospital markets team. Had a good team. We were growing. We had success. And I got a phone call from Dr. James Stoll, who's a spine surgeon in Milwaukee, and said, I've heard about you from a mutual friend, and I'd like to have breakfast with you. So he talked about this company that he had since 2008 tried to get off the ground, and it was sort of sputtering. And it was this company, Smart Choice MRI. And they had a location in West Milwaukee, and it was, doing fine. So from 2008 to 2014, in his words, they kind of made every mistake possible, and were thankful to be at a point where they had leveled things off and knew that they may have something, but they didn't have anything in terms of what it would take to grow it. And so I went back. I said, hey, I've got this opportunity. And Dana said, the beauty of this business is it's so simple, and you could literally change people's lives by offering a better solution at a lower cost, and you could scale this. Again, we sort of debated for a while because the last year of Sharecare, I spent a majority of my time with Dr. Oz flying around doing these health events around the country together. So I remember in my head thinking, well, tomorrow I'm going to go fly to Portland with Dr. Oz for the week. Or I could sit in West Milwaukee in basically an abandoned trailer and manage 6 people in an office. I think I'm going to stay with the Dr. Oz gig. And yet she was right. And so I was in Colorado with Jeff and his wife, Meg, and Dana and I laid out the business plan. And Jeff said, the beauty of that business, it's so simple. You're providing a great solution at a lower cost. Why can't you have these on every corner? And so he said, go for it. And so I left Sharecare and learned more in the last 6 years leading a company than I ever thought was possible. I kind of thought I'd done everything, been around everything, I had seen and heard everything. And if you're, like I called myself earlier, kind of that faithful lieutenant, you know a lot. You've learned a lot. But when all of a sudden you have to make payroll and you've got to negotiate contracts with companies like GE and you've got to make decisions about where to grow, that's really hard stuff. And I just thought I knew it all. So the thing that I'm grateful for in the last 6 years of my life was that at, now 53 years old, I thought I knew everything. But in the last, like I said, the last 6 years, I learned more in 6 years than I learned my entire career.
And speaking of evolution over a really, really short period of time and how things can change, how we can learn, and also how technology can change, let's turn our sights, if we can, Rick, to what we're calling healthcare 4.0. The folks that we spend time with, we talk a lot about Industry 4.0, about IIoT, connected systems, all of these technologies like smart sensors and smart devices and data analytics and algorithms. And we'll get into predictive analytics and machine learning here in just a moment. I know that technology is proliferating in industry, but it's advancing rapidly in your world, in the world of healthcare as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. Well, let's start with Smart Choice MRI as sort of a test case. In the 6 years that I've been leading the company, we've grown from one location to 17. And on those 17 locations, we've served, just in a 6-year time period, about 112,000 people, unique patients. So if you think about 112,000 people, and let's say the average MRI scan sequence, let's call it there's, 10 images, right? The number of images we have archived, de-identified, confidential, of course, is into the millions. And if you think about what an MRI machine is, as one person in our industry mentioned to me, it's just a massive magnetic $1 million data collection device. And so if you went to the RSNA, the Radiological Society of North America conference, which is the largest in McCormick Place in Chicago every year, everybody was talking about AI. And so you've got applications where, if you think about how the MRI space works, is you have a $1 to $3 million machine powered by a very highly trained technologist that's capturing an image that is then being read by a radiologist with their glasses on a computer screen. Now, the radiologists are brilliant and very capable of what they do, but when you read 75 or 80 exams a day, you can miss something. Human error is real, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it can be life-changing. And so when the machines can start to take millions of data points, run them through their algorithms to come up with, what does this look like? What does this not look like? I don't think personally that you're going to see the rise of the machines to where the radiologists are out of work. There was a period a couple of years ago where the radiologists were just scared to death, like the machines are going to take over. You have to remember, like in the typical radiology world, the way it works is so we're the largest partner in the world for the Cleveland Clinic. So the Cleveland Clinic reads all of our exams at Smart Choice. So we're pumping in literally, hundreds of patients per day into their radiology portal, and they pick them up and read them in an order by which they receive them. And they bifurcate those by specialty. So like a musculoskeletal doctor will read just the bone breaks. A neuro radiologist will read the brain work and the spine work. And then there's a third, we call abdominal body. So things in the central body cavity. Those disciplines, they split it out so that they're not reading things they don't normally see, but they don't know if they're reading a spot on a lung that's nothing or it's stage 4 breast cancer. Which one do you think maybe they should spend more time on? And so what AI is doing now is saying, look, you're going to send all the images to the radiologist, but we're going to take these 4 out of the 100 that just got pushed over, and we're going to flag them for being potential problems. And maybe those should just go to the top of the stack. And so that's one way AI is really changing. It's already changing in our space where that's happening. And then there's companies there's a really cool company out of Minneapolis called InBio. And what they're doing is they're doing complex CT lung screening for COPD and other progressive lung diseases. And it's never been done before. You could, if you had COPD and you went to your doctor and they hold up your image of your lungs, it shows how prevalent the disease is. And then you go a year later and then they hold up an image next to it and say, well, see, it's better or worse. But again, even that is human eyes looking at sample A, sample B and saying, oh, there's more blobs on the screen. And I'm minimizing it because I'm not a radiologist. But what InBio does is basically frequent scanning and has an algorithm that shows the progression by node, within the lungs of what's happening in real time, beautiful, graphically pleasing for a patient to understand. That's just one example of literally hundreds of, if not thousands of companies trying to solve a particular problem. And it's the little guys like that to the big guys like GE who came to us last year and said, we get all this data from imaging from academia. UW is a big provider of data to GE so that the machines can get smarter, the people can get smarter. But they said, what we're missing is all the routine stuff. So at Smart Choice, we do a ton of things like people that have their knee hurts, they got injured playing football over the weekend, they've got headaches lately, they can't figure out why. A lot of that sort of day-to-day routine stuff, whereas in academia, it's such esoteric kind of fine line stuff that you don't see every day. That what AI needs, as I'm sure you guys know, is you need a lot of data that can be repetitively churned into a model. And so GE partnered with us and said, we want to de-identify the data. And they do it in a way where they say, we want 50,000 images of left knees of males over the age of 50. Because someone is doing a research study or a trial on a device, let's say, that they need that data. And we have that data. And so the data has become extremely powerful.
And so the whole idea of artificial intelligence, obviously, and the huge amounts of data. I mean, I hadn't even thought about that, but being able to pinpoint as fine as, as you suggest, left needs on people over the age of 50, and then being able to extrapolate that data into models that can predict the future, and that can certainly allow those that are administering solutions to do that much more specifically and much more effectively, and I'm sure much more efficiently. And really, those types of advances are taking place in all kinds of sectors of our economy. So healthcare, manufacturing, we see the same thing in retail and distribution and hospitality and agriculture. And so our ability to gather tremendous amounts of data through the advent of smart sensors and smart devices, and then be able to analyze that data, is revolutionizing literally every sector of the economy. So we have kind of a thesis, Rick, that we're working on, and actually working with several higher education institutions on this idea of, when you think about that technology, you think about smart sensors and smart devices, and data collection and networking, cybersecurity, and then you get into the analytics and the artificial intelligence side of it. That model repeats itself over and over in so many different segments of our economy. So we've got this idea that, could we create a whole new field of skilled technicians that use this type of technology? They're accustomed to it, they're familiar with it, but maybe they learn it in a healthcare environment, or they learn it in a manufacturing environment, but then they can take it to another arena. For example, if somebody learned it in the world of distribution or manufacturing, they could take it to healthcare after learning a little bit about how that knowledge is applied in the specific market. And similarly, technicians who understand that technology in healthcare could learn a little bit about logistics or manufacturing and port in that direction. Do you see that? Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just take something that I think a lot of us do. I happen to do. I don't have an Apple Watch, but I track my steps every day as just a very simple baseline indicator of how I should take care of myself, among other things, in terms of exercise and what I eat and watching those things. But I know, for example, that I average about 13 to 14,000 steps a day. I look at it every day. Yesterday I did 19,787. And someone would say, well, why are you doing that? Well, because I know it's a pretty good baseline indicator of, if I'm moving and I'm not sitting, and we've all heard the sitting is the new smoking moniker, it's good for me. And you think about how that applies to a factory setting, right? So there's companies like, there's one in Milwaukee called Scanalytics that is a startup that's gotten very smart about learning foot traffic patterns in retail settings. And they've got sensors they use to sort of, track where people's movements are. But you think about the efficiency that can happen in the workplace, and this is just an idea. Maybe someone's already doing this, but the idea that your footsteps around a factory floor could be more efficient by measuring them, or that if we can get our workers on a front line, factory line moving more, that's going to lower our healthcare premiums and give us a healthier workforce. So I think the idea that you can quantify and measure and then make decisions, whether you're in a factory, whether you're in a hospital, whether you're on a distribution center, I think those things are really important. And I think it's probably the one thing that people can relate to, whether you're the CEO or you're the newest employee on the job. When I say relate to, I don't know a whole lot of CEOs of manufacturing companies that know how to operate the robots. And I don't know a whole lot of healthcare system CEOs that know how to operate on patients. But it's one of those things that we all relate to. And I think that definitely cross-pollinates.
And it's interesting you bring that up. My monthly magazine column that's published in Products Finishing Magazine and in Production Machining Magazine, I actually go into the value for a CEO to learn a bit about the base technology that they're overseeing. But certainly, you're exactly right. As someone who spent 20 some years as a senior executive in manufacturing, there was a lot of technology that I didn't understand how to operate, but I certainly understood how to use it to grow the organization. And those lessons certainly paid off on the manufacturing side, and as well as in the education side, where we spend most of our time today. So speaking of education, and particularly STEM education and healthcare, we spend a lot of time cementing the idea that the number one influence of a young person's career pathway is what they are interested in and what they experience while they're in middle school and high school. And that's actually been proven. There was a study not long ago by the Manufacturing Institute and Skills USA where they interviewed 23,000 young people as they were entering the workforce. And they asked them, what influenced your pathway? And all the usual suspects were on the list: coaches, parents, career advisors at school, social media. Those were all on the list. But the number one influencer was their own interests and their own experiences in middle school and high school. So do you feel like we're doing a good enough job of getting young people excited about careers in STEM and specifically in technology?
Maybe the best way I would answer that is to talk about sort of my own life and I would say the previous generation to today, right? So you've got someone like myself, and maybe you as well, Matt, who went to a small liberal arts school, got a degree in history, and every one of my friends got a degree in something in liberal arts, mainly management. So we churned out this massive group of post-boomers, Gen Xers that all had management degrees. Well, there's no doers there, and you can only have so many people going to investment banking and, going into, I'm going to be a partner at Goldman Sachs someday. The real work is done on the ground. And I think we did a terrible job for a long time because everybody had to go to college. And if you didn't go to college and graduate, something was wrong with you or your family. And I think, even the concept of STEM, even a few years ago, most people couldn't identify what that is. Now I think, if you're relevant in today's workplace, you know what STEM stands for and you know what's happening in terms of why it's important. I think we've been behind globally. We all know that. I think it's getting better. But I think the biggest thing I would say, and again, I'm not on the ground every day in the local high schools, but it feels like people are accepting the idea that 4-year liberal arts degree is not necessarily the only path to take. Frankly, you're going to make a whole lot more money being a plumber for your entire career, most likely. A skilled trade like that, and I grew up in the skilled trades. Most people, they laugh when I tell them. So by the time I was 20, I was a heavy equipment crane operator. I operated everything from skid steer loaders to trenching equipment to a 120-foot crane. And I'm sitting in a suit and tie in a meeting, and they look at me like, "You're lying." Like, no, I really know how to do that. And on a personal level, I take great joy in the fact that, like, when I'm working around our house on the weekend, I do stuff. I do it myself. I know the value of hard work, and I know how to figure things out myself because, I grew up in the trades, and I understood what it was like to grab a particular tool out of my toolbox and know how to use it. And I think we lost that for a while. So it's very encouraging to see that come back.
Absolutely. And I know the kind of household you grow up in because I've had the pleasure of actually meeting your parents on several occasions and just amazing people. And it is interesting how there's this whole segment of our economy of folks that, that maybe came about the opportunity to lead companies and to have very, very successful careers in business, but found their way to those careers in ways that that you and I did not. And you wonder sometimes if maybe our world needs to get back to that a little bit. And I know you alluded to that in the answer to the last question. If you could change one thing about our system of education, Rick, what would you say that you would change?
Well, it may be repeating my prior answer, but I think getting people to understand in the early years of high school that there's multiple paths to success, whether it's in the trades, whether it's learning an applied skill, whether it's a 4-year degree. I remember one time my mom saying to me in front of my wife, "You should have been a doctor," because I'm in healthcare, right? And to watch my wife laugh at her and say, "He could never have been a doctor." And she's right. Like, I knew I didn't have the abilities. I didn't have the science and math skills. My grades proved it, to be a physician. I also didn't want to be a physician. So I think being comfortable with what you're good at is really important. And knowing that early and having people support you in the educational system early, I think that's really helpful. I also think that understanding that it's okay if you're not an investment banker by the time you're 30. I think, Matt, you probably would agree. I think it was probably about age 35 that I really learned what I was good at. And I remember my old pastor in Atlanta, Andy Stanley, once had a comment. We said, the more I do, the less I accomplish. And what I've learned is that, like at Smart Choice, I think I'm a pretty good leader. I think I can be pretty inspirational. I think I have an idea of taking what I want to do and saying, we can go do this, and then getting it done. I think I'm good at raising capital and managing investor relations. I don't think I'm a really good operator. I don't know how to manage the day-to-day things as well as others in our company do. So I think back to the question about education, the idea that you can be comfortable early knowing that you don't have to be something that your parents want to be. And having that from the household to your school system, finding a way to let kids know early that it's okay to just tell us what you want to be. I'll give you a good example, and it's on a personal level of how I think we could do better, and a good example of how we have done better. So my son, Rick, went to Whitefish Bay schools in Wisconsin. And in middle school, was a good kid and struggled with some of the classes, the rote stuff, history, science. But in seventh grade, he met a teacher named Mr. Balistreri who was teaching an entry-level photography class. And Rick took it and just, A plus, best student in the class, just killed it. And then in eighth grade, Mr. Balistreri taught him second level photography, and he aced that as well. He got to high school and they didn't have a program for it. And all of a sudden they said, well, you're really good at this. Why don't you do like a self-study class? And so he did that for 2 or 3 years and did very well. Well, today, because of a teacher that believed in him and said, you're really good at this. Hey, maybe you're not good at history, but you're really good at this. Well, today he's a young, struggling but successful commercial photographer living in New York, pursuing his career dreams. He's been all over the world, from Japan to Korea to Romania to Guatemala. He's been everywhere, done everything, and he's a happy, successful young man because he found his passion. He found what he was good at, but it was one teacher that made that difference. And, it's really cute because when he comes back to Milwaukee, he's actually gone to visit Mr. Balistreri to thank him for that inspiration. So I think more teachers being aligned and aware, and I think they are more today, but being aligned and aware of the fact that you got to tune into what these kids are good at and let them know that there's a career path ahead that's not just a 4-year degree.
So Rick found that passion, and really it totally shaped the future of his career. And when we think, Rick, about the future of healthcare, I want to talk a little bit about where you see that technology going. For an example, outside of healthcare, I'm a believer that within 10 to 15 years, flying cars will be commonplace. So I'd be interested in hearing, what way out there technologies are you hearing about in healthcare, and then maybe one example of how you believe healthcare will evolve in the future that everyone else thinks you're crazy for believing.
Things like joint replacement. I mean, you think about today, a hip or a knee replacement is so routine that it's silly. I mean, they're done countless times around this world every day. But, we still can't replace a shoulder, an elbow, or an ankle. We can take a human heart, stop it from beating, take it out of the body, and put it back in after you fix whatever plumbing you're fixing in there, and restart it, and the person can go home in a couple of days. But if you have a bad foot, an elbow that was, injured, the shelf life of the current technology for shoulder, elbow, ankles, those high motion, high repetitive, high stress joints, it really doesn't exist. It may, they've tried, things last a few years, they wear out. So I think orthopedics is going to be a big win in our lifetime. Just like for our parents' generation, having their knee replaced was like a new lease on life. I think you're going to see a lot of that.
It'll be fascinating to see how that evolves. And I hadn't even thought of that, to be honest with you, as someone who separated a shoulder skiing, which is another passion that the two of us share, just a couple of years ago, and it hasn't been quite right since then. We'll look forward to that evolution in healthcare. Rick, in the couple minutes that we have left here, would be really interesting. What an amazing career you've had, both inside of healthcare and outside. Just a phenomenal guest here for the Tech Ed podcast. So thank you for being with us. What do the next 5 years look like as far as your radar is concerned? What are the next 5 years going to bring for you?
I think that I learned in the last 6 years what it's like to lead a company. What I want to do is take that learning or those learnings and apply it to the next opportunity. Remember, I talked earlier in the visit about, consumerism and how that was sort of an anchor point of Smart Choice, letting consumers know they have a better choice. They can have a lower cost, high quality solution that's better than going to the hospital. I think what I want to do personally is make sure that I capitalize on that. As I mentioned earlier, when I was, about 35 before I figured out what I wanted to be, I think the Sharecare, WebMD, and Smart Choice and Ovation experiences combined are all about one thing, and that is consumerism. The fight against the incumbents that make you believe you have to go to the hospital for your MRI, or you have to have carpal tunnel surgery with a scalpel and take 6 weeks to recover as opposed to, 1 day with us at Ovation. The incumbents are so entrenched and so unwilling to bend on new technologies or meeting the consumer via patient experience where, on their terms and serving them where they live, they work, they play. No one wants to go to the hospital, especially now with COVID. But even beyond that, hospitals are places where sick people go. And so when we put Smart Choice on a street corner next to a Starbucks and next to LA Fitness, something that really became something that the consumer appreciated. And so I think for the next 5 years for me personally, it's going to be looking for opportunities to extract the service lines out of a hospital that shouldn't be done there. I'll give you one last example of something I'm working on now. One of the most expensive things that's done today in healthcare is stress tests and echocardiography, basic routine imaging of the heart. That's a $6,000 bill for a consumer at a large health system. That could be done for a third of that. You're not opening someone up. You're not fixing their heart. You're just imaging it to see if the disease is progressing. So why would you want to go to, a hospital X, park in the parking garage on the 4th floor, get lost trying to find the cardiac department, go by a bunch of sick people, when you could literally go down the street corner to Target to a very beautifully appointed clinic where you're the only one there, and you get your stress echo or your echocardiography work done, and you go back to work. That's the kind of stuff that excites me, and that's what I'm going to be looking for the next 5 years.
Well, and as the world of healthcare and perhaps other markets lead you there, there's no doubt that there's no better disruptor to lead the entire industry, the entire healthcare industry, into that type of innovation. And so, Rick, thank you so much for joining us today on the Tech Ed Podcast. It's been a fascinating discussion. I know our audience will enjoy it, and we really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you, and happy to be part of it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a review, and if you like this episode, share it with a friend. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so listen in next week.